Ladies and gentlemen, don't move, don't stir. The best is still to come.
Caribbean, back to black or Caribbean Sea. Caribbean or Caribbean Sea. Makoko. Makoko the fabulous, the hawk of the sea, the prince of pirates, whose spirit and legend will live on through the ages for his immortal deeds, staggering to the imagination and ravishing the sensibilities with tales of wealth, of stolen treasure, of maidens captive for a whim or a caress. Oh, I can see you now in battle, the clash of swords, the roar of angry cannon, and you, Makoko, standing there with lightning breaking about you, you dominating everything.
Manuela, there's something I have to tell you.
And to think I thought you were nothing but a common actor. Oh.
Now look, I've apologized abjectly. What more can I do? Just exactly... You're overdoing this. You're being vindictive.
Judy Garland was born Frances Ethel Gumm on June 10, 1922. She died on June 22, 1969. She was an American actress and singer. She is widely known for playing the role of Dorothy Gale in The Wizard of Oz, 1939. With a career spanning 45 years, she attained international stardom as an actress in both musical and dramatic roles, as a recording artist, and on the concert stage. Renowned for her versatility, she received an Academy Juvenile Award, a Golden Globe Award, and a special Tony Award. Garland was the first woman to win the Grammy Award for Album of the Year, which she won for her 1961 live recording titled Judy at Carnegie Hall. Garland began performing in vaudeville as a child with her two older sisters, in a vaudeville group the Gumm Sisters, and was later signed to Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer as a teenager. She appeared in more than 24 films for MGM. Garland was a frequent on-screen partner of both Mickey Rooney and Gene Kelly and regularly collaborated with director and second husband Vincente Minnelli. Other starring roles during this period included Meet Me and Street Louie, 1944, The Harvey Girls, 1946, Easter Parade, 1948, and Summer Stock, 1950. In 1950, after 15 years with MGM, the studio released her amid a series of personal struggles that prevented her from fulfilling the terms of her contract. Although her film career became intermittent thereafter, two of Garland's most critically acclaimed roles came later in her career. She received a nomination for the Academy Award for Best Actress for her performance in A Star is Born, 1954, and a nomination for Best Supporting Actress for her performance in Judgment at Nuremberg, 1961. She also made record-breaking concert appearances, released 8 studio albums, and hosted her own Emmy-nominated television series, The Judy Garland Show, 1963 to 1964. At age 39, Garland became the youngest and first female recipient of the Cecil B. DeMille Award for Lifetime Achievement in the Film Industry. In 1997, Garland was posthumously awarded the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. Several of her recordings have been inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame, and in 1999, the American Film Institute ranked her as the 8th greatest female screen legend of classic Hollywood cinema. Garland was born Frances Ethel Gumm on June 10, 1922, in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. She was the youngest child of Ethel Marion, née Milne, 1893 to 1953, and Frances Avant Frank Gumm, 1886 to 1935. Her parents were vaudevillians who settled in Grand Rapids to run a movie theater that featured vaudeville acts. She was of Irish, English, Scottish, and French Huguenot ancestry, named after both of her parents and baptized at a local Episcopal church. Baby, as she was called by her parents and sisters, shared her family's flair for song and dance. Her first appearance came at the age of 2, when she joined her elder sisters Mary Jane Susie Suzanne Gumm, 1915 to 1964, and Dorothy Virginia Jimmy Gumm, 1917 to 1977, on the stage of her father's movie theater during a Christmas show and sang a chorus of Jingle Bells. The Gumm sisters performed there for the next few years, accompanied by their mother on piano. The family relocated to Lancaster, California, in June 1926, following rumors that her father had homosexual inclinations. Frank bought and operated another theater in Lancaster, and Ethel began managing her daughters and working to get them into motion pictures. In 1928, the Gum sisters enrolled in a dance school run by Ethel Meglin, proprietress of the Meglin Kiddies dance troupe. They appeared with the troupe at its annual Christmas show. Through the Meglin Kiddies, they made their film debut in a short subject called The Big Review, 1929, where they performed a song and dance number called That's the Good Old Sunny South. This was followed by appearances in 2 Vitaphone shorts the following year, A Holiday in Storyland, featuring Garland's first on-screen solo, and The Wedding of Jack and Jill. They next appeared together in Bubbles. Their final on-screen appearance was in an MGM Technicolor short entitled La Fiesta de Santa Barbara, 1935. The trio had toured the vaudeville circuit as the Gum sisters for many years when they performed in Chicago at the Oriental Theater with George Jessel in 1934. He encouraged the group to choose a more appealing name after Gum was met with laughter from the audience. According to theater legend, their act was once erroneously billed at a Chicago theater as the Glum Sisters. Several stories persist regarding the origin of their use of the name Garland. One is that it was originated by Jessel after Carole Lombard's character Lily Garland in the film 20th Century, 1934, which was then playing at the Oriental in Chicago. Another is that the girls chose the surname after drama critic Robert Garland. Garland's daughter Lorna Luft stated that her mother selected the name when Jessel announced that the trio looked prettier than a garland of flowers. A TV special was filmed in Hollywood at the Pantages Theater premiere of A Star is Born on September 29, 1954, in which Jessel stated, "I think that I ought to tell the folks that it was I who named Judy Garland, Judy Garland. Not that it would have made any difference. You couldn't have hidden that great talent if you'd called her Tel Aviv Windsor Shell, you know, but her name when I first met her was Frances Gum, and it wasn't the kind of a name that so sensitive a great actress like that should have, and so we called her Judy Garland, and I think she's a combination of Helen Hayes and Al Jolson, and maybe Jenny Lind and Sarah Bernhardt." A later explanation surfaced when Jessel was a guest on Garland's television show in 1963. He said that he had sent actress Judith Anderson a telegram containing the word Garland and it stuck in his mind. However, Garland asked Jessel just moments later if this story was true, and he blithely replied no. By late 1934, the Gum sisters had changed their name to the Garland sisters. Frances changed her name to Judy soon after, inspired by a popular Hoagy Carmichael song. The group broke up by August 1935, when Suzanne Garland flew to Reno, Nevada, and married musician Lee Kahn, a member of the Jimmy Davis Orchestra playing at Cal Naval Lodge, Lake Tahoe. Garland starred in 3 films released in 1940, Andy Hardy Meets Debutante, Strike Up the Band, and Little Nellie Kelly. In the end, she played her first adult role, a dual role of both mother and daughter. Little Nellie Kelly was purchased from George M. Cohan as a vehicle for her to display both her audience appeal and her physical appearance. The role was a challenge for her, requiring the use of an accent, her first adult kiss, and the only death scene of her career. Her co-star George Murphy regarded the kiss as embarrassing. He said it felt like a hillbilly with a child bride. During this time, Garland was still in her teens when she experienced her first serious adult romance with bandleader Artie Shaw. She was deeply devoted to him and was devastated in early 1940 when he eloped with Lana Turner. Garland began a relationship with musician David Rose, and on her 18th birthday, he gave her an engagement ring. The studio intervened because, at the time, he was still married to actress and singer Martha Raye. They agreed to wait a year to allow for his divorce to become final. During that time, Garland had a brief affair with songwriter Johnny Mercer. After her breakup with Mercer, Garland and Rose were wed on July 27, 1941. A true rarity is what the media called it. The couple agreed to a trial separation in January 1943, and divorced in 1944. In 1941, Garland had an abortion while pregnant with Rose's child at the insistence of her mother in the studio since the pregnancy wasn't approved. She had a second one in 1943 when she became pregnant from her affair with Tyrone Power. In her next film, For Me and My Gal, 1942, Garland performed with Gene Kelly in his first screen appearance. She was given the glamour treatment in presenting Lily Mars, 1943, in which she was dressed in grown-up gowns. Her lightened hair was also pulled up in a stylish fashion. However, no matter how glamorous or beautiful she appeared on screen or in photographs, she was never confident in her appearance and never escaped the girl next door image that the studio had created for her. One of Garland's most successful films for MGM was Meet Me in St. Louis, 1944, in which she introduced three standards: The Trolley Song, The Boy Next Door, and Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. This was one of the first films in her career that gave her the opportunity to be the attractive leading lady. Vincente Minnelli was assigned to direct, and he requested that makeup artist Dorothy Ponadell be assigned to Garland. Ponadell refined her appearance in several ways, including extending and reshaping her eyebrows, changing her hairline, modifying her lip line and removing her nose. She appreciated the results so much that Ponadell was written into her contract for all her remaining pictures at MGM. At this time, Garland had a brief affair with film director Orson Welles, who at that time was married to Rita Hayworth. The affair ended in early 1945, and they remained on good terms afterwards. During the filming of Meet Me in St. Louis, Garland and Minnelli had some initial conflict between them, but they entered into a relationship and married on June 15, 1945. On March 12, 1946, daughter Liza was born. The couple divorced by 1951. The Clock, 1945, was Garland's first straight dramatic film. Robert Walker was cast in the main male role. Though the film was critically praised and earned a profit, most movie fans expected her to sing. She did not act again in a non-singing dramatic role for many years. Garland's other films of the 1940s include The Harvey Girls, 1946, in which she introduced the Academy Award-winning song on the Atchison, Topeka, and the Santa Fe, Until the Clouds Roll By, 1946. In April 1948, during filming for The Pirate, Garland suffered a nervous breakdown and was placed in a private sanatorium. She was able to complete filming, but in July she made her first suicide attempt, making minor cuts to her wrist with a broken glass. During this period, she spent 2 weeks in treatment at the Austin Riggs Center, a psychiatric hospital in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. The Pirate was released in May 1948 and was the first film in which Garland had starred since The Wizard of Oz not to make a profit. The main reasons for its failure were not only its cost, but also the increasing expense of the shooting delays while Garland was ill, as well as the general public's unwillingness to accept her in a sophisticated film. Following her work on The Pirate, she co-starred for the first and only time with Fred Astaire, who replaced Gene Kelly after Kelly had broken his ankle, in Easter Parade, 1948, which became her top-grossing film at MGM. Thrilled by the huge box office receipts of Easter Parade, MGM immediately teamed Garland and Astaire in the Barclays of Broadway. During the initial filming, Garland was taking prescription barbiturate sleeping pills along with illicitly obtained pills containing morphine. Around this time, she also developed a severe problem with alcohol. These, in combination with migraine headaches, led her to miss several shooting days in a row. After being advised by her doctor that she would only be able to work in 4 to 5 day increments with extended rest periods between, MGM executive Arthur Freed made the decision to suspend her on July 18, 1948. She was replaced in the film by Ginger Rogers. When her suspension was over, she was summoned back to work and ultimately performed 2 songs as a guest in the Rogers and Hart biopic Words and Music, 1948, which was her last appearance with Mickey Rooney. Despite the all-star cast, Words and Music barely broke even at the box office. Having regained her strength, as well as some needed weight during her suspension, Garland felt much better, and in the fall of 1948, she returned to MGM to replace a pregnant June Allyson for the musical film In the Good Old Summertime, 1949, co-starring Van Johnson. Although she was sometimes late arriving at the studio during the making of this picture, she managed to complete it 5 days ahead of schedule. Her daughter Liza made her film debut at the age of 2.5 at the end of the film. In the Good Old Summertime was enormously successful at the box office.
I'm gonna haunt you so, I'm gonna taunt you so, it's gonna drive you to ruin. After you've gone away.
Oh, you beautiful doll, you great big beautiful doll. Let me put my arms about you. I don't want to live without when you walk.
In 1963, Garland sued Sidney Luft for divorce on the grounds of mental cruelty. She also asserted that he had repeatedly struck her while he was drinking and that he had attempted to take their children from her by force. She had filed for divorce from Luft on several previous occasions, even as early as 1956, but they had reconciled each time. After her television series was cancelled, Garland returned to work on the stage. She returned to the London Palladium performing with her 18-year-old daughter Liza Minnelli in November 1964. The concert was also shown on the British television network ITV and it was one of her final appearances at the venue. She made guest appearances on The Ed Sullivan Show and The Tonight Show. Garland guest hosted an episode of the Hollywood Palace with Vic Damone. She was invited back for a second episode in 1966 with Van Johnson as her guest. Problems with Garland's behavior ended her Hollywood Palace guest appearances. A 1964 tour of Australia ended badly. Garland's first 2 concerts in Sydney were held in the Sydney Stadium because no concert hall could accommodate the overflow crowds who wanted to see her. Both went well and received positive reviews. Her third performance, in Melbourne, started an hour late. The crowd of 7,000 was angered by her tardiness and believed that she was drunk. They booed and heckled her, and she fled the stage after 45 minutes. She later characterized the Melbourne crowd as brutish. Garland's Melbourne appearance gained a negative press response. Garland's tour promoter Mark Herron announced that they had married aboard a freighter off the coast of Hong Kong. However, she was not officially divorced from Luft at the time the ceremony was performed. The divorce became final on May 19, 1965, and she and Herron did not legally marry until November 14, 1965. They separated 5 months later. During their divorce, Garland testified that Herron had beaten her. Herron claimed that he only hit her in self-defense. For much of her career throughout the 1950s and early 1960s, her husband Sidney Luft had been her manager. However, Garland eventually parted ways with Luft professionally, signing with agents Freddie Fields and David Begelman. By the fall of 1966, Garland had also parted ways with Fields and Begelman. Fields's and Begelman's mismanagement of Garland's money, as well as their embezzlement of much of her earnings, resulted in her owing around $500,000 in total in personal debts and in debts to the IRS. The IRS placed tax liens on her home in Brentwood, Los Angeles, her recording contract with Capitol Records, and any other business dealings in which she could derive an income. Garland was left in a desperate situation that saw her sell her Brentwood home at a price far below its value. She was then cast in February 1967 in the role of Helen Lawson in Valley of the Dolls by 20th Century Fox. According to co-star Patty Duke, Garland was treated poorly by director Mark Robson on the set of Valley of the Dolls and was primarily hired so as to augment publicity for the film. After Garland's dismissal from the film, author Jacqueline Suzanne said in the 1967 television documentary Jacqueline Suzanne and the Valley of the Dolls, "I think Judy will always come back. She kids about making a lot of comebacks, but I think Judy has a kind of a thing where she has to get to the bottom of the rope and things have to get very, very rough for her. Then with an amazing inner strength that only comes of a certain genius, she comes back bigger than ever." Returning to the stage, Garland made one of her last U.S. appearances at New York's Palace Theater in July 1967, a 27-show stand, performing with her children Lorna and Joey Luft. She wore a sequin pantsuit on stage for this tour, which was part of the original wardrobe for her character in Valley of the Dolls. Garland earned more than $200,000 from her final run at New York's Palace Theater from her 75% share of the profits generated by her engagement there. On closing night at the Palace, federal tax agents seized the majority of her earnings. By early 1969, Garland's health had deteriorated. She performed in London at the Talk of the Town nightclub for a 5-week run in which she was paid £2,500 per week, and made her last concert appearance in Copenhagen during March 1969. After her divorce from Heron had been finalized on February 11, she married her fifth and final husband, nightclub manager Mickey Deans, at Chelsea Register Office, London, on March 15. On June 22, 1969, Garland was found dead in the bathroom of her rented house in Cadogan Lane, Belgravia, London. At the inquest, coroner Gavin Thurston stated that the cause of death was an incautious self-overdosage of barbiturates. Her blood contained the equivalent of 10 1.5 grain, 97 milligrams, Seconal capsules. Thurston stressed that the overdose had been unintentional and no evidence suggested that she had died by suicide. Garland's autopsy showed no inflammation of her stomach lining and no drug residue in her stomach, which indicated that the drug had been ingested over a long period of time, rather than in a single dose. Her death certificate stated that her death was accidental. Supporting the accidental cause, Garland's physician noted that a prescription of 25 barbiturate pills was found by her bedside half empty and another bottle of 100 barbiturate pills was still unopened. A British specialist who had attended Garland's autopsy stated that she had nevertheless been living on borrowed time owing to cirrhosis, although a second autopsy conducted later reported no evidence of alcoholism or cirrhosis. Her Wizard of Oz co-star Ray Bolger commented at her funeral, "She just plain wore out." Forensic pathologist Jason Payne James believed that Garland had an eating disorder. Psychologist Linda Papadopoulos asserted that it was probably bulimia nervosa, which contributed to her death. After Garland's body had been embalmed, Deans traveled with her remains to New York City on June 26, where an estimated 20,000 people lined up to pay their respects at the Frank E. Campbell Funeral Chapel in Manhattan, which remained open all night long to accommodate the overflowing crowd. On June 27, James Mason gave an eulogy at the funeral, an Episcopal service led by the Reverend Peter Delaney of St. Marylebone Parish Church, London, who had officiated at her marriage to Deans 3 months earlier. Judy's great gift, Mason said in his eulogy, was that she could wring tears out of hearts of rock. She gave so richly and so generously, that there was no currency in which to repay her. The public and press were barred. She was interred in a crypt in the community mausoleum at Ferncliff Cemetery in Hartsdale, New York, a small town 24 miles, 39 kilometers, north of Midtown Manhattan. Upon Garland's death, despite having earned millions during her career, her estate came to $40,000, equivalent to $218,261 in 2019. Years of mismanagement of her financial affairs by her representatives and staff along with her generosity toward her family and various causes resulted in her poor financial situation at the end of her life. In her last will, signed and sealed in early 1961, Garland made many generous bequests that could not be fulfilled because her estate had been in debt for many years. Her daughter, Liza Minnelli, worked to pay off her mother's debts with the help of family friend Frank Sinatra. In 1978, a selection of Garland's personal items was auctioned off by her ex-husband Sidney Luft with the support of their daughter Lorna Luft and their son Joe. Almost 500 items, ranging from copper cookware to musical arrangements, were offered for sale. The auction raised $250,000, equivalent to $784,567 in 2019, for her heirs. At the request of her children, Garland's remains were disinterred from Ferncliff Cemetery in January 2017 and reinterred 2,800 miles, 4,500 kilometers, across the country at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery in Los Angeles. Garland struggled in her personal life from an early age. The pressures of early stardom affected her physical and mental health from the time she was a teenager. Her self-image was influenced by constant criticism from film executives who believed that she was physically unattractive and who manipulated her on-screen physical appearance. Throughout her adulthood she was plagued by alcohol and substance use disorders, as well as financial instability, often owing hundreds of thousands of dollars in back taxes. Her lifelong substance use disorder ultimately led to her death in London from an accidental barbiturate overdose at age 47 in 1969.
Here's one of your all-time sweethearts, another command performance for that lovely sweater girl, Judy Garland.
Thanks, Bob. Hiya, fellas. Sweater girls. Bob, why are men so crazy about sweater girls?
I don't know, Judy. That's one mystery I'd like to unravel.